2019's Harriet is easily one of the most racist, ignorant pieces of propaganda that I have ever seen. It's gratuitous, disingenuous, mean-spirited, and downright disrespectful to Harriet Tubman's legacy. Not only does this movie demonize the victims of slavery, but it also romanticizes the oppressors. Never in a million freaking years would I have thought that a Harriet Tubman movie would make the slave masters the hero and the villain a black bounty hunter by the name of Bigger Long. And yes, you heard me correctly, the villain of the movie is a black guy by the name of Bigger Long. I'm sorry, but this is some repugnant ass shit. Look, I know this is my first time speaking with you earthlings at home, and I'm doing my best not to use any obscenities, but I have to call a spade with this one. Now, for the people at home who might not be aware of what this movie is about, allow me to give you an abridged version, as I really don't want to waste too much time today talking about the plot of this film, as half of it is made up anyway. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, let's jump into the film. At the beginning of the movie, Harriet Tubman runs away from Gideon, her master, when he doesn't agree to set her future children free. Shortly after she escapes, Gideon decides to hire a black bounty hunter by the name of Bigger Long in order to track her down. With the help of William Still and Marie, Harriet Tubman decides to go back to her old plantation in order to rescue her remaining family members and a few additional slaves. Eventually, Bigger and Gideon track Harriet down to William's office, where Bigger violently beats Marie to death by punching and kicking her in the face when she refuses to divulge Harriet's whereabouts. Eventually, as time passes, Harriet rescues more slaves and garners the nickname Moses. And again, it doesn't take long before Bigger and Gideon track Harriet down. But this time, when Bigger and Gideon finally corner Harriet on a hill, Gideon, the same man who hired Bigger to capture Harriet, shoots Bigger to death. Gideon then proceeds to tell Harriet that he is in love with her before Harriet escapes and goes free. And yes, my friends, this is the story of Harriet Tubman. No joke. This is the story that Hollywood released to the masses. Where do I even begin? First things first, for those of you who are not aware, there is no historical record of any black bounty hunter who went around catching slaves for white plantation owners, period. I need everyone at home to understand that. In addition to that, there is no historical record of any person by the name of Bigger Long that chased Harriet around while she was freeing slaves. Any person with an IQ of 12 and a general understanding of United States history would know that during the time that Harriet Tubman was freeing slaves from 1849 to 1860, white slave owners had an unparalleled fear of slave uprisings, as they were pretty freaking common. They would never, and I repeat, they would never allow any black person to run around with a gun unchecked and uncontrolled. It just wouldn't happen. And if you think I'm BSing you, allow me to share a few excerpts to prove the validity of my claim. This quote actually comes from Theodore Branter Wilson, The Black Code of the South. It was published in the University of Alabama Press in 1965, and the excerpt is going to come from pages 26 through 30. Begin quote. It is not surprising that the first North American English colonies, then the states of the new republic, remained in dread fear of armed blacks, for slave revolts against slave owners often degenerated into less selective forms of racial warfare. The perception that free blacks were sympathetic to the plight of their enslaved brothers, and the dangerous example that a Negro could be free, also caused slave states to pass laws designed to disarm all blacks, both slaves and free. So as you can clearly see here, most laws during that time period were designed to disarm all blacks. So let's continue with another excerpt to prove the validity of my claim. In Maryland, these prohibitions went so far as to prohibit free blacks from owning dogs without a license, and authorized any white to kill an unlicensed dog owned by a free black, for the fear that the black would use the dog as a weapon. Mississippi went further and prohibited any ownership of a dog to a black person. So as you can clearly see, black people couldn't even own a dog, let alone a gun. So that means Bigger Long's funky ass would not have been able to do any of the shit that he was doing on film. But I digress. Let me hit you guys with another quote so I can chop this racist film to shreds. So the next excerpt I'm going to be using today comes from Stanley Elkin's article on slavery. It was published in the University of Chicago Press in 1968. The page number is 220. Begin quote. Understandably, restrictions on slave possession of arms go back a very long way. While armed restrictions on free blacks predated, these restrictions increased dramatically after Nat Turner's rebellion in 1831, a revolt that caused the South to become increasingly irrational in its fears. Begin new quote. Virginia's response to Turner's rebellion prohibited free blacks to keep or carry any firelock of any kind, any military weapon, or any powder or lead. The existing law under which free blacks were occasionally licensed to possess or carry arms was also repealed, making arm possession completely illegal for blacks. Now, before we go any further, let's turn the camera back at me because I want to chop this racist film up. Turn that camera back over to me right now. Now, did you guys hear that last part? Completely illegal for blacks. Completely illegal for blacks. What part of that do you not understand, Hollywood? So once again, Bigger Long could not have existed, as blacks were not allowed to own guns, firearms, dogs, or any type of ammunition. So this begs the question, why was the character Bigger Long made up in the first place? And why was he placed in a Harriet Tubman film? This film was supposed to be the true account of her life, the unspeakable horrors and the obstacles that she had to overcome, i.e. slavery. Do you see how violent Twisted Hollywood is? Instead of telling the truth about what really transpired during slavery, during Harriet Tubman's life, they would have you believe that a black man was the true villain in slavery, not the white man or the white woman, even though we actually have thousands of historical records to substantiate this. And now that I'm on this subject, come to think of it, none of the white plantation owners beat, whipped, or tortured any of their slaves the entire movie. In fact, the only real violence in the film came from the black slave catcher Bigger Long. I kid you not. Instead of using violence in the Harriet film to get what they wanted, the slave masters would frequently converse with their slaves in a soft-spoken, tactful voice like a manager would speak to his employee.